I'm Marcus, 44 male. For the last 20 years, I was the undisputed king of Chicago's culinary scene. I built an empire of 7 high-end restaurants from the ground up, a business worth over $47 million. $3 months ago, I lost it all in a single afternoon. This is the story of how my wife and my best friend framed me for a crime I didn't commit, and how a secret my mother took to her grave gave me the power to take back my life. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. 3 months ago, my life was perfect. I mean that. At 44, I had everything a man could dream of. My flagship restaurant on Michigan Avenue was a jewel, with 2-year waiting lists and crystal chandeliers I'd personally sourced from Venice. My face was on magazine covers, critics called me a visionary, and my $47 million net worth was just a number that proved I'd succeeded. It was a long way from where I started. My father, Raymond, died when I was 24, leaving me with one small diner and $40,000 in debt. He was a good man but a terrible businessman. I was fresh out of culinary school, full of ambition, and I worked 20-hour days for years. I was the dishwasher, the line cook, and the accountant. That one diner became my classroom. Within 5 years, I opened my second location. That's where I met Roxanne. She was the bank manager who approved my loan. "I don't usually do this," she'd said, sliding me her personal number, "but I believe in your vision." 6 months later, we were married. For 22 years, she was my partner in everything. She was the brain, I was the heart. I focused on the food, the magic, as she called it. She handled the books, the deals, and the expansion. "We make such a perfect team," she'd say at every grand opening, squeezing my hand for the cameras. We couldn't have children, but the restaurants became our family. 8 years ago, I found Dmitry Vyulov. He was a brilliant chef, but his Brooklyn restaurant was failing. He was on the verge of bankruptcy, working alone in his kitchen at midnight, practicing a sauce technique. He reminded me of myself, hungry and desperate. I offered him a job. "In New York, you're one of 10,000, I told him. "In Chicago, you'll help define the city's cuisine." He moved 2 weeks later. I trained him, promoted him, and eventually made him the executive chef of all 7 locations. The night I gave him the promotion, he cried. "You saved my career, boss," he said, gripping my shoulders. "I owe you everything." I trusted him like a brother. I trusted them both with my life. The morning my life ended started like any other. I woke at 5:00 a.m. in our Lincoln Park penthouse, kissed Roxanne's forehead while she slept, and drove to the flagship. The sunrise over Lake Michigan was gold, and I remember thinking how proud my father would have been. I was in the kitchen tasting the lunch specials when my assistant, Patricia, ran in. Her face was pale. "The health inspector just arrived," she whispered. "Unscheduled visit." I wasn't worried. "That's fine," I said, sampling the soup. "We're always ready." "It's not a tricks," she said, wringing her hands. "It's someone new, a guy named Nadler." I should have paid attention to the warning bells. I should have noticed Dmitry suddenly appear in the doorway, watching me. I should have wondered why Roxanne had texted me an hour earlier. "At the spa all day, don't wait up tonight." But I was confident. We ran the cleanest kitchens in the city. Inspector Nadler was young, maybe 30, with nervous eyes. He walked through my kitchen like he was hunting for something specific, swiping surfaces I knew were spotless. He seemed almost disappointed. "Everything seems in order," he said after an hour. "I'll just need to sample a few dishes. Standard procedure." "Of course," I said, signaling my head chef. "Dmitry, prepare a tasting menu for Inspector Nadler, our best." Dmitry nodded, his face unreadable. "Whatever you think represents us best," I said, heading to my office to check invoices. This was routine. I was reviewing beef prices when I heard the scream. It wasn't the normal chaos of a kitchen, it was pure, unadulterated terror. I ran so fast I knocked my coffee over. In the dining room, Inspector Nadler was on the floor, convulsing violently, foam pouring from his mouth. His eyes were rolled back, showing only the whites. "Call 911, I yelled, dropping beside him. His skin was turning blue. What did he eat? What was the last thing he ate? Dmitry stood frozen, holding an empty plate, his face a mask of shock. "The salmon," he whispered. "He just finished the salmon with béarnaise." The ambulance arrived in 6 minutes. The police arrived in 8. They sealed my kitchen like a crime scene. "Ryson," Detective Morrison said. We were in an interrogation room at buzzed with fluorescent light. "We found ricin in the béarnaise sauce, enough to kill a horse. Inspector Nadler is in critical condition. If he dies, you're looking at murder charges." My mind went blank. That's impossible. How would that even get in our kitchen? You tell me, she said, sliding a photo across the table. It was a security still of me in the prep area that morning. You were at the sauce station 30 minutes before Nadler arrived. I check everything every morning, that's my job. Your head chef says differently. She pulled out a document. Dmitry Vyulov's statement says you specifically asked about the Béarnaise, says you seemed nervous, kept checking your watch. He also says you were the only one who knew about the surprise inspection, says you got a tip. The room spun. Dmitry was lying. Why was Dmitry lying? I want a lawyer, I managed to say. They released me 16 hours later, but the damage was done. Every news channel ran my photo. Celebrity chef attempts to murder health inspector. My world evaporated, investors pulled out, contracts were canceled. The health department revoked all my licenses. 7 restaurants, my life's work, shut down overnight. The bank seized the properties. My accounts were frozen. That night I found Roxanne in our bedroom packing a suitcase. She folded each dress with mechanical precision. I can't be married to someone who would do this, she said, her voice cold, professional. Roxanne, you know me, 22 years, you know I didn't do this. She finally turned and her eyes were not sad or angry. They were calculating. The evidence says otherwise. Dmitry told me you've been paranoid about inspections lately. Dmitry told you, I asked, the blood draining from my face. When did you talk to him? Does it matter, you're going to prison? She zipped her bag and walked out. 2 weeks later, living in a roach-infested studio apartment, I got the text that confirmed it. It was from Roxanne. You'll never work in this business again. Should have been smarter with the prenup. Dmitry sends his regards from Cabo. They were together, they had planned it all. I was 44 years old, worth nothing, and blacklisted from the only industry I'd ever known. The only job I could get was delivering food for an app. Rock bottom is quiet. It's the smell of acetone from the nail salon below my apartment. It's the sound of the elevated train shaking the walls. It's the humiliation of delivering food from restaurants I used to own. For 3 months, I became a ghost. I wore a baseball cap pulled low, lost 30 pounds, and stopped making eye contact. I deliver food to people I used to host at dinner parties and they'd look right through me. The worst part was the silence. No sizzling pans, no shouting orders, just me and my 15-year-old Honda, listening to other people's lives through their apartment doors. Every night I thought of my mother, Genevieve. She died when I was 25, just as I was getting started. Her last words to me were, "Make me proud, Marcus. Show them what our family can do." I had failed her completely. That Thursday, the rain was coming down in cold, miserable sheets. At 4:47 p.m., an order popped up. Jep's Italian, chicken marsala. The address was a law office downtown, Petin and Associates. I parked illegally, ran through the rain, and walked into a lobby of marble and old money. The doorman looked at my soaking delivery bag with disdain. "Service elevator," he grunted. I found the suite at the end of a long, carpeted hall. I knocked, expecting to just leave the bag, but the door opened. A man in his 70s with silver hair and a perfectly tailored suit stood in the doorway. He looked from my hat to my face and he froze. The Jep's bag in my hand was leaking marinara sauce onto his Persian rug. He just stared. "You're Raymond Duval's son, aren't you?" he said. It wasn't a question. My hand started shaking so hard the receipt fell into a puddle. How do you know my father?" "I was your mother's lawyer," he said, his voice urgent. "My name is Gerald Pettin. Please come inside. We need to talk. Something has changed." I followed him in. His office smelled of old leather and older money. He pulled out a manila folder so old the edges were yellow. "Your mother, Genevieve, came to me in 1990, before she met your father. She had just inherited a substantial sum from her family in France." "That's impossible," I stammered. "My mother was a waitress. She clipped coupons. We were broke." "She was brilliant," Gerald said with a sad smile. "She wanted you to learn the value of work just as she'd watched your father struggle and build. She set up a trust. It was to remain hidden until you turned 45. He slid a document across the desk. "Current value is $83 million. I couldn't breathe. The number didn't make sense. $83 million. My mother, who mended her own clothes, had hidden a fortune. "But there's more," Gerald said, handing me a sealed envelope. My name was on it in her perfect, familiar handwriting. I opened it, my hands trembling. "My dearest son," it read. "If you're reading this, you've survived something terrible. I know, because that's the only reason Gerald would tell you early. The money isn't important, it's what you do after you've lost everything that defines you. Now it's your turn, use this gift not for revenge but for redemption. Build something better. Tears streamed down my face, mixing with the rain on my jacket. How did you find me? I whispered. How did you know it was me delivering food? I didn't, Gerald said, pointing to a stack of receipts. I've been ordering food from every restaurant in the city twice a day for 3 months. Your mother made me promise to watch over you. When I read about what happened, I started ordering. I just had to wait for you to knock on my door. He then pulled out another, thicker folder. Your mother also left this documentation she gathered. She never trusted Roxanne. She called her a shadow circling your light in her notes. She even had concerns about a new chef you'd hired. The trust had a clause. If my financial ruin was caused by deliberate criminal means, the funds could be accessed immediately. The next day, the $83 million was at my disposal, but I didn't want a new car or a penthouse. I wanted justice. We hired the best private investigators in the country. They worked like surgeons. Within a week, they had recovered deleted texts between Roxanne and Dimitri dating back 2 years. It was all there, the secret vacations. The plan. The ricin dose needs to be just enough to cause symptoms, Roxanne had texted. Not fatal, just dramatic, we need him blamed. They had bribed my regular inspector, Atrix, to call in sick so the inexperienced Nadler would be sent. But Dimitri, in his arrogance or his panic, had miscalculated. He used 10 times the dosage they'd planned, nearly killing an innocent man. With the text messages and financial records, the FBI stepped in. The arrests were swift and beautiful. They picked up Roxanne at a beach bar in Cabo, mojito in hand, as she was laughing with her new friends. They found Dimitri in Miami, where he was about to sign the papers on a new restaurant he was funding with my stolen money. The name he'd chosen, Phoenix. The irony was sickening. The trial was a media circus, but this time I wasn't the villain. I was the man who had lost everything. I sat in the front row every day, clean-shaven, wearing a suit, and watched them. They looked so small. Roxanne's defense was that she was a woman scorned. But on the witness stand, her composure cracked. It wasn't guilt that poured out, it was rage. I was tired of being in your shadow, she screamed, pointing at me. Every interview, every article. It was always about you, the genius chef, the visionary. I handled every deal, every negotiation that made your dreams possible. And what did I get to be? The chef's wife. She confessed to everything, right there on the stand, sealing her own fate and Dimitri's. They both got 15 years for conspiracy, aggravated assault, and grand fraud. Inspector Nadler, who thankfully survived but with permanent kidney damage, won a massive civil suit against them that took every penny they had left. My name was cleared. The criminal charges against me were dropped. I was free, I was wealthy, and I was completely empty. I had $83 million and my name back, but I didn't rebuild my empire. Instead, for 6 more months, I kept delivering food. Gerald thought I was insane, but I needed to understand what my mother meant. Build something better. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was an observer. I learned about the elderly woman on Maple Street who always ordered soup and always tipped $5 she couldn't afford. I learned about the night shift nurses at the hospital, too tired to cook. I started talking to the other drivers. There was Destiny, a single mom working 2 jobs to save for culinary school. There was Jerome, who had his grandmother's recipes that he knew could win awards. They had the same fire I'd had at 24, but none of the advantages. When I finally opened my new restaurant, it wasn't on Michigan Avenue. It was in the neighborhood I had delivered to, in the building that used to house the nail salon. I didn't import chandeliers. I hired Destiny as my head chef. I helped Jerome perfect his grandmother's recipes, and they became our signature dishes. We served 5-star food at food truck prices. The business model shouldn't have worked, but my mother's trust fund covered any losses, allowing us to pay high wages and keep prices low. The lines formed around the block. We've now opened 3 more locations, all in neighborhoods the big chains ignore. Every employee owns a piece of the business. Last week I got a letter from prison. It was from Roxanne asking for forgiveness, saying she finally understood what she'd thrown away. I wrote back with just one line. The trust matured right on time. Turns out 45 is exactly when you learn who you are. Above the kitchen door, there's a small plaque, Genevieve's Garden, where everything grows back stronger. My mother knew I had to lose an empire to find my purpose.